Yes, we're live. It is 7:30 something, so it's good. When a few more people get here, what I want to do is I'm going to read a post that that kind of called me out. It's good information. I'm not even going to tell you the person because they're you know they're probably a a young guy new to the industry and that kind of stuff, and that's fine. But what the post does is allow me. Gives me some good talking points because obviously if this person is confused about things, and right off the bat when we talk about this, you'll see, well, yeah, I could see where this direction is going because it's math. So there's confusion about it. He's not the only one that's going to be confused, so it's a good topic of discussion, and it'll be about valve springs because valve springs are a common thing. We have to talk about that all the time. Obviously, whenever you change the camshaft in we're talking about an LS, but really all of the other engine families, any motor that you put together. And I like that just as a side note, I like that the guys from, I don't know, one of the bigger channels, Power Nation or one of those guys did a deep dive into the motor versus engine thing, and they came to the same conclusion that I have had for years, and regardless of whatever conclusion they came to, I would not change mine, that it's esoteric and people shouldn't worry about it, that engineers are typically the ones that talk about, oh, motor is electric and engine is the internal combustion, where I'm like, look, they're interchangeable. In our industry, they're interchangeable. If you say one and you say the other, people will know exactly what you're talking about. Just like if you say 400M or if you say 455 Pontiac's a big block, if you say all that stuff, people will understand it. And so I will just keep doing it. But back to our subject. So I want to talk about springs. So I'll read to you what this gentleman talked about. He said, I just grabbed a truck NORRIS cam, so BTR cam, good cam. Great. Shout out to the BTR guys. Love them over there. I just grabbed a truck NORRIS cam and its lift is 553. So that's honest. The kit I bought came with 550 springs. Will I be okay using 550 springs on a 553 lift cam? I asked because the lift on the springs is 3 thousandths more. It's the one on the spring is 3 thousandths less than the cam is. The cam is bigger than the springs are, is what he's saying. Once again, the kit came with 550 lift springs. So why would a kit come with the springs I can't use? Right? I'm not sure. This is my first build. Good old Richard says it will be fine because he did reach out to me and ask me. He said, hey, look, can I do this? And I said, yeah, we sell the springs we sell are 550 lift spring or 560 lift springs, but you can use the 550s, referring to all the factory LS3, LY6, all of the factory 550 lift springs, because a lot of those camshafts are 550 or even more than that lift. So all that works fine. But Google ... and a few other sources say that that's not okay. So for those who are going to say you should have just bought 560 springs and you'd be fine, well, the springs came with the kit, so please save those comments. I'm concerned a bit about the 3 thousandths difference. So he's asking now. There's a lot of things going on here. So one of them could be that this guy already knows the answer and he's just doing this to get lots of people commenting. The other thing is he doesn't know the answer, and he's also doing it to get lots of engagement because he's new and maybe doesn't have a big following or whatever. You never know what the motivation is. But if we assume that he's asking an honest question and he's saying, okay, I got a 553 lift cam, I got 550 lift springs, 553 is more than 550. So from a math standpoint, I can see the logic and I can understand the confusion if that's the case. That's, we understand that. So he went on and did a search, and I guess talked to other people. So the first thing I want to talk about is, you guys know how I don't want to be one of many people that they ask. I don't get there's no value to me if somebody asks me a question. Like, I don't get an ego stroke or any of that. I don't care about any of that. In fact, I'd rather, I want to go out and help as many people as I can. And I try to do that, and I've chosen to do that for a living. And so all of that's fine. But it doesn't matter to me that he listens to me and not somebody else. And so I would rather not have them ask if I'm going to be one of 10 people that they ask. Just go do that over there and go about your business. And it doesn't matter. I'm not going to jump up and down and tell you that I'm right, because I don't care about that. The other side of that is I'm also not going to give you an answer. If you ask me a question and it's, hey, what color do you like? Do you like a red Corvette better than a blue Corvette or whatever? And it's something where I would have to give you my opinion. I'll preface it by saying this is my opinion. In the spring thing, I'm not going to give you an opinion. I'm going to give you a fact, and I will state it as a fact. And if you ask me what it is, I'm giving you the information. I'm not giving you my opinion on that. I know what the answer is. It's just like I know about gravity and all these other things. I know what that is. And so I know what the answer is. I'm going to give you the answer. It is the correct answer, just like if anybody else and many other people chimed in and gave you the correct answer for a lot of different reasons. I'm going to give you the correct answer. I'm not going to give you that if you're going to put the same value on that as you do from Chat GPT or from Google or from Joe Schmo over here or whatever. I'm not going to do that. That doesn't interest me. But it got me thinking, here's why, and this is an interesting thing. Here's why that works. So first of all, if you're new, you don't really understand this. But the how much lift your spring will accept is a function of a number of things. One of them is installed height. So right off the bat, if you're talking about a difference of 3 thousandths, you would have to assume that if 550 was the absolute number, if the number that they were giving you on the spring, by the way, it's not, and we're going to go into that, but if the number that they gave you on the spring was 550 lift, and it won't go any more than that, because that's coil bind, because that's not it. If that were coil bind, you would also have to know whether or not all of your installed heights are within 3 thousandths. And I guarantee you that they're not. None of the factory ones are, and none of the ones that people set up are, because I don't know of a shim that comes, unless you machine it, I don't know of a shim that comes in 1,000th increments, and nobody would do that. So your installed height is going to vary by plus or minus more than that, probably more than 2 or 3 thousand. So you're worried about something, even if that was the case, you're worried about something that also, again, is not going to be a problem. The other reason that this would not be a problem is that you won't have 553 lift when this thing is running. You'll have deflection in your system. You'll have movement in the push rod. You'll have deflection and stuff. So you won't always have that. So even if you had a problem with that kind of lift, you wouldn't have to worry about that, because you're not actually going to have that kind of lift. The other thing is, and the most important thing of all of this, is that when we give you a spring, when we give you a lift value, we say it's a 550 lift spring, that assumes 550 lift plus a safety margin of, the safety margin actually varies between different things. But when you're running a camshaft, ideally you could run it between 30 and 40 thousandths, distance to coil bind. So if you had a 550 lift spring, that 550 lift spring probably would go to 570 or 580 fairly comfortably, even maybe more than that, depending on how much margin that they give you, because you don't want to run the spring at coil bind. And none of the valve springs, when they give you a rating for them, is at coil bind. It's all with more safety margin to allow in. And like I said, I get asked all the time the opposite of this too. Hey, can I run a 660 lift spring? Yeah, you can, but you shouldn't. You shouldn't have that much like uncompressed spring. It should be a lot closer to coil bind than that. Otherwise, you allow movement, you allow frequency movement in the spring, and that's not good. So you should use the spring that's appropriate for the camshaft that you're using. But a 550 lift spring will accept a much bigger than 550 lift cam. So will the 560 lift thing. And then also that we're talking about the installed height. If your installed height is higher, it'll accept even more. If it's more than, let's say that they gave that number at 1,800. If your thing is 1,820, well, then you don't have to worry about that. You're gonna have a little less spring pressure, but you don't have to worry about coil bind, and so you don't have to worry about that. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is that this brings up an important point, and we're not there yet, but we will be there, where people, and I already have people sending me comments saying, hey, why can't you put all of your information, online. So somebody that can just plug stuff in. His example was about muzzle velocity for bullets and things like that. We could plug all this stuff in. I'm like, yeah, this has been known for a long time. And there are books on that. And now there are computer programs on that. But the reason that stuff works is because all of that data, like they've already shot that bullet. They've already shot that slug, that weight, with that powder, with that charge, with all that stuff. Somebody did that. Somebody had to test that. And chat is not going to do that. Google is not going to do that. All they're going to do is take the information that guys like me, and there's lots of guys like me that have put that information in there. But right now, that's all that it can do. All that it can do is gather together all this information, which is a lot, which is it would have more than I have, because I don't have access to everything that Steve Morris has done and Nelson and all these guys. I don't have access to all of that stuff, and it will. So it will have a lot of information, but it won't have done any tests. And I think it's pretty far off, even at the accelerated rate that it's learning. That, in fact, Jimmy was telling me, I went on to chat and I asked it, what is the, what LS cam would give me the most average power? And it spit out a number of 228, 232 or something like that. We're like, yeah, well, that's not it. And it doesn't know that because it doesn't have all of that test data to look at. And also going up to the next few levels above, where it just as a information gathering source, and then spitting out, computing all that, and then spitting that out. It doesn't know yet, and maybe it's listening now. It doesn't know yet to ask, well, where do you want that power? What are you trying to achieve? It doesn't know all of that stuff. Maybe it gets there, and then we're not listening to Richard anymore. We're just going online. Hey, what cam should I use? Maybe it will be able to do that. But this young guy has, is an interesting thing. And so it's a good subject for discussion, because obviously there's quite a bit of confusion on springs. So hopefully we can, kind of get a better idea on what's going on with springs and how we choose the right ones, because it's very important. Of like I said, a 550 lift spring will work on lots of different ranges, for probably from 560. Guys have told me they've run 580 lift springs with those too. And again, installed height, where the coil bind is, all that stuff comes into play. And if you cheat stuff around and move it around, you probably can get away with some of that stuff. But that's why when somebody ever asks me a question, the answer is always, it depends, because there's lots of things that come into play there, and not just that number. And that's kind of what he was going by. So, but that's also why cam manufacturers, like that we're selling these cams and springs and stuff, that's why the guys put together cam and spring packages, so that it just makes it easy. Here, put this cam in and this spring, and it will work. These work together. These work. Put these on your LS and you're all good, and everything will be fantastic. Okay, will Chat GPT ever replace people for engine data questions? Is that time coming? Is the rise of the machine coming? Let's see. Untrue. Surfer Drag. Jet, what's going on? Alive in real time. Sweet. Saw his Facebook post. Good topic to touch on. Yeah, I responded to that. I made a post on it. Just a funny one. I'm watching your episode on Fastest Cars on Netflix. I had no idea you were here. Yeah, that was fun. That was a great thing with Chad and his family, in memory of Daphne, who was just like 17 different kinds of awesome. Get away. Good to see you. Chad GPT makes things up on the spot as far as automotive. I have seen a lot of questions just like be wildly inaccurate. But that's that's the way it is with everybody, and everybody that learns stuff, it's that way. Chat sensors. Springs you want as close as possible. Don't overspring with 600 springs. Bad for all. I might Cody swap my G8. Thoughts on this? That's fine. I have a 4.8 LS and a Ranger. I'm finishing single bed mount turbo. I'm on my second LS and the G8. I'm thinking going Coyote. Yeah, put in what speaks to you. It's going to be more expensive probably, but they definitely make power. If you're on the edge of lift capabilities, does that mean you can't turn over a certain RPM? No, actually, it means the opposite of that. That's why we get the thing close to coil bind. So if you have a spring that's designed for a 550 lift cam and we have 20 or 30 thousandths before coil bind, the spring will be able to RPM better that way because it doesn't have like a bunch of unsupported coil that allows movement. I knew the chat was coming. Pretty sure the pressure of the spring is the main issue with RPM. It's pressure and frequency. It's not just pressure. You can't cure things with more pressure. Hit the like button. As far as folks wanting to run more spring is beyond me. Maybe they think it's stronger. It'll last longer. That's just not how to think about it at all. That is it. That the spring thing is the more is better thing. They're like, oh yeah, but if I could, I've had people tell me, yeah, I could put your the low buck truck camshaft in, and then I could put a bunch of spring in it and I could rev it. I'm like, well, no, actually, that's not going to work. It's probably not going to work because the camshaft has an effective RPM range. Not because the motor won't physically rev, but it's not going to make power there. And also the big thing we're talking about springs, and guys think that the next level of understanding is that, well, we just put more spring rate in it. Yeah, and no. Yes, and that you're going to have more spring rate as a function of RPM. Like a stock spring is not going to take you there. Now we've revved stock stuff to 7,000 RPM, junkyard motors, and they will do that. They're not making any power there, but they'll rev there. But the other thing that you want to think about is, and guys don't talk about this a lot, but you have to have the cam profile itself has to be a stable profile. And all the spring rate in the world, if you have an unstable cam profile, it's actually going to make that worse. It's not going to make it better. And so you can't, like I said, you can't overcome that. It has to work together. And if you watch Ben Strader over there, he's really good at that kind of stuff. I just installed my roller rockers on my LS1, got half to turn a quarter. Is it normal for the push rods to have some play in the lifters? I can push them in the plunger. If the lifters are not pumped up yet, then yeah, you can have some play in the lifters. You're just working against the spring if they're not pumped up. That's why I like, if you're doing I don't know if you're doing an LS, if you were doing an LS, sometimes it's hard to put oil pressure in those unless you have the external ones, external pressure canisters. But once you put oil in them, that's when I like to adjust the valves or check for push rod length, basically. Bobby, what's going on? No point in educating it. Ironically, AI gets complex math equations wrong almost every time. Yet you would think that a computer would be really, really good at two things: repetitive tasks and math. I've had extremely poor results in trying out AI. Yeah, but it's still fairly early on. I mean, it's gonna get better. So you guys need to say nice things about it so that it won't eliminate you. Which LS cam gets you the most average power? Richard, when in doubt, do what we do for more power. Just add JO assist. Yeah. I feel like I waited all week for this. I said no, but I think they'll find a way to replace us sometime soon. I've heard of people saying chat tuned my car. Yeah, don't think that I would allow that. It's my understanding too much spring pressure is worse than not enough. Richard knows more about dyno testing than AI. Have you ever watched any of Brand Racing Engines dyno testing? He did some really neat tests with headers. Is that the one that you guys were? Somebody was talking. Somebody sent me an email or a note about that. About somebody trying maybe different lengths or something. We've done adjustable headers before. Long time listener, first time chatter. Welcome, Bruce. It's hard to find a cam with over 220 that isn't 600 lift. At least the stuff I look at. If you can help explain something, I was looking at a Summit cam that's 550. Some say that the RPM range up to 7,000, but they recommend using a 660 lift spring when going that high. I don't understand that either. I would ask them about that. It might be that their 550 lift spring, their single 550 lift spring, doesn't have a lot of rate. But I would not put a 660 spring on a 550 cam. Could you run a 511 spring on stock 5.3 springs? You'd have to check on that and see. I think yes, but I know that we've run 500, 502, or 503, something like that. 511 probably would work. I would just like to see how much room they have to coil bind. The other thing to think about on those stock springs on a 5.3 is how many miles do they have on them? So how strong are they now compared to what they were? What's a good low profile cathedral port intake manifold? The truck Trailblazer style won't fit on my Ranger. Why are you guys barking? What's going on? Huh? There's nothing out there. I know, that's probably your friend across the street, huh? Hey, don't bark. The low profile manifold LS6 is good. The Dorman is good. The Fast is good. Depending on what kind of range you want. I just file the base of the spring to make them fit. Yeah, that's not recommended. I have an 06 GTO 228 cam. 243s, dual spring, high ram. I explained the entire setup to chat. It told me that the car should make 420 to 440 wheel. On the dyno, it made 438. It scared you a little. It's a pretty good guess. Everybody thinks his car will beat mine because of chat. I love all the younger guys embracing chat, but they need to do it. They need to take it with a grain of salt right now. High mileage springs are probably a good idea to change them out anyways. It's cheap insurance. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, you know, if you get a truck like mine that has, or Jimmy's Tahoe that has 350,000 miles on it, it's not just the fact that the cam will fit, you know, the low 500 lift cam will fit with those springs and still give you a reasonable amount of, you know, coil bind clearance. But they've had a hard life. It's like the Roggers too, are kind of like that. Looking at buying a 6.2 Escalade for my wife. Would pull the engine and trade out the lifters for conventional lifters. Trunnions, put a mild truck cam in it. New oil pump, barbells. The barbells we never change, but yeah, that's fine. Trunnions are not a bad idea. I mean, how many miles does the 6.2 have on it? Is it bad? And is it a DOD one or a VVT one? Looking to buy the 5.3 max effort cam package you sell. We don't have a max effort one. Just tell me what you're trying to do. I'm wanting to rev at 8,000. We don't have an 8,000 RPM package. How reliable will a 5.3 rev in that high? It's not going to be reliable. $8,000 RPM is a drag racing kind of thing. So Chris, Summit 227, 239, 108, 550 lift. Would you recommend using something like a 550 spring over a 6? Yeah, that would be fine. Or the springs that we have are 600 or 625 if you want a dual spring. A 227 cam with a 108 is not going to, and well, it's got a 239, so it's got a 12-degree split. So I don't know how high you are thinking you're going to rev that. I don't remember what motor it's in. 150,000 mile variable valve timing. Would you ditch the variable valve timing? What else would you do? Unless you're running it with a factory ECU and you just want to drive it around and just want it to be stock, that's fine. All of that works very well. If you're wanting more performance out of it, then you're going to have to get rid of the variable cam. You're going to have to go with a fixed cam. And then it's going to obviously need to be tuned. It's package on your site. Oh, the BTR cam. Yeah. Okay. How would you feel comfortable revving while keeping it reliable? It's the more RPM that you run, the less reliable it is. So it's not going to be, you don't get factory reliability and all this horsepower and RPM. Those don't go together. So as you go up in RPM, and there's no magic point where you still get all of that. As you slide up that scale, it gets less reliable. When you're setting up your timing curve on an LS engine, what do you set idle timing degree at, and how fast do you ramp up to full timing? I don't do that. I don't care about idle timing because I don't do that on the engine dyno. Now, if you're talking about the stuff on the chassis dyno, that's something different. I'd have to talk to Jimmy about that and see what they're doing. But we probably put like 15 degrees or something in it when we're idling it. And when we go to wide open throttle, the dyno holds a stationary load. So when I roll into it, it just goes up into a load to full throttle at that RPM, 22,000, 2,500, 3,000, whatever the RPM is. Factory ECU, can you tune it for a fixed cam? Yes, you can. In fact, we're working on tunes right now. Speaking of springs, anyone know off the top of their head which keepers and stuff you use with LS6 springs in a small block Chevy? I don't think that they're going to know that off the top of their head, because you're going to have to have a different, unless you have a small diameter valve stem that's an LS style valve stem, and the whole keeper and retainer assembly is going to be different. I wonder if chat would tell you that every cam is a turbo cam. I would be every bit as interested in or concerned with the oiling system if you're racing it as I am about RPM potential. How would tunes work? Yeah, we'll have ECUs, and then it'll just be a swap thing. All hail the algorithm. The algorithmics. Algorithmination. Near. Dang, cap locks are on. What is the best turbo cam? What's the best cam? One of the things that the people are pointing out is, and it's a common thing on social media. It's one of my favorite, like, made up words. I posted that on Facebook. The ask holes. So I wanted to say that properly, so YouTube wouldn't get mad at me. But I think that don't be an ask hole, I think needs to be a shirt. So let me know what you guys think, if that should be a shirt. That's one of my favorite words, because it's true. They just ask and ask and ask and ask. And I get that here. I get questions, like I get the same question over and over, you know, different nights or whatever. I'm like, look, we've gone through this, man. This answer is the same as it was, same as it ever was. But people will go on and